So today we're going to talk about one of those big topics, heaven. This is the fourth in a series of 6 presentations on, I'm calling it Objections to the God Hypothesis. Sounds pretty noble. Well, why do I call it that? Because we spent 3 years looking at the scientific evidence that a creator exists. And we looked at both sides, and we followed the evidence. We said, does it point to a God, or does it point to no God? Which direction does the evidence? I started off with the idea of 7 presentations that turned into 26. They're all on the web and all on the website, so I encourage you to do that. But in doing those presentations, there was always objections that came up. The first one was, why is there evil and suffering in the world? Can you really believe in miracles if you're a scientist? Can you believe in heaven, or is that just wish fulfillment? That's superstition, wish fulfillment. Well, all these major religions, do they say something different? Why do they say something different? And then how does the religious worldview and the scientific worldview, how do they even come together? Can they come together? Or is it just over here and over there? That's usually how our education system works. You learn science from a materialistic viewpoint in school, and then you go over here to learn about going to heaven and praying at night. These are questions that need to integrate. So we're going to talk about that tonight. Is there any scientific evidence for heaven? Good question. We'll be talking about that. But to even talk about the afterlife, we should start off, what is religion? Is religion science? No. What is religion? And we all know what religion is because we have this innate longing in us to know ultimate questions, ultimate answers to questions for our being. Why do we believe? And we end up believing something, and then why do we believe what we believe? You know, I always, Gail and I, my wife and I always, when we talk about, well, there's one point of view, there's one other point of view, first thing we say is, well, let's check it out. Check it out. It's important. Even if you can't get a full answer, checking it out is really important. So we're going to check out religion tonight. Religion is the way we weave our life, our worldview. We weave that together over these ultimate concerns. And it provides a foundation for reason. Do we just believe it? Is it just blind faith? That's what my favorite atheist, Richard Dawkins, says. Religion's ridiculous. It's just blind faith. Well, maybe it isn't blind faith. Is there evidence for it? We've been checking out evidence. We're going to check out evidence for heaven tonight. There's a reason, and there's a framework. We have a moral framework in our hearts here to live rightly. Not to live wrongly, to live rightly. The very first forum we had back in October, very perceptive question from the audience, because I was making the proposition positing that a good God could coexist with evil and suffering. And he said, well, how do you know the God is good? Maybe he's evil. Whoa. Is he evil? Have you thought about that? Are we in the Matrix? I mean, there's a whole movie series about, there's a brain in a vat somewhere, and we're just a simulation. And in 30 seconds, we're all going to disappear like that. How we think rightly about things is what religion is. And we pursue religion in 3 ways. We just don't pursue it through science. We just don't pursue it through blind faith. We pursue it starting with philosophy. Oh, that's too heavy. No. Philosophy is just the love of wisdom. If we want to check things out, if we want to live wisely, we check things out and live by wisdom. So the unexamined life is not worth living, Socrates told us, and that's the theme of the whole club that we have here. But this innate longing that we have, we know we have it. We might see it with a beautiful sunset. We might see it in a picture. We might see it in the music as it was coming in. We might just have one of those insights of there has to be something else, this innate longing. And a famous atheist by the name, he was an Oxford Don by the name of C.S. Lewis, who was an atheist, just described this. He called it an inconsolable longing that he can't quite describe. You can't quite get your hands around it, but it's built into us. It draws our hearts and our imaginations from this present situation to another world out there that we can't quite grasp. But we know that the material world and technology can't satisfy it, especially at our age, right? We've been there. We've had this, and after a while, there's no more red Corvettes. There's no more trips around the world. There's no more amount of money. There's no more this and that and so forth that will bring this longing to a termination. That longing will always be there. But religion beckons with this material world that's this world that's beyond, that we call transcendent. In other words, if this was all there is, the cosmos is all there is, all there ever was, according to Carl Sagan and the scientific materialists, that means there's nothing out there. But God is, and the afterlife is transcendent, it's out there, and yet God transcends from here, and he comes intimate with us. We'll talk about that tonight. The scripture puts it this way: everything under the sun is futile and striving after wind. I sure found that to be true. Under the sun means everything that's down here eventually becomes futile and striving after wind. But God has set eternity on our hearts. In our series, we showed that having a creator is the most logical and most scientific idea, more so than materialism. And that was the topic for the last three seasons, so go on the web for that one. But there's also a moral law that's written on our hearts. We have a conscience. We have a conscience, and we know that. So that's what religion is, this incorporation of this vision beyond. The whole 8 billion people. Of course, a hardcore atheist, materialist, maybe a multi-billionaire might say, well, that's 8 billion people are wrong, like Jack Nicholson did say in the bucket list. But 8 billion people, 90% of the people are religious. More than half of them are Western religious. That's here. 32% Christian, largest religious belief in the world. 23% Muslim. Western means it came from a conversation between God and Abraham, some 2000 BC. So those are the Abrahamic religions. And then a quarter of them are Eastern, which means that we look inside for answers, that we are the same as God, and we become our moral and have our purification over time through reincarnation. We're going to chat about that. But it gets down to only 7% or so are really hard agnostic or atheist. I was one of them, some 45 years ago anyway, and I had religious experience myself, which led me to believe. Religious beliefs are always found in the cultures. Anthropology finds them. The very first evidences we ever find of a culture is not its social interactions, not even its artwork, it's its religious practices. And we've been finding that out from the ancient Greeks, the ancient Egyptians, the Pharaoh. Why did they build those pyramids? Well, one of the most predominant reasons that we found they built this because we could preserve a body inside, because they believed that you turned into a spirit when you died, and the spirit's wandering around, it needs a home. So it comes back to its home in the pyramid. They put maps inside the pyramids so the spirits could find their way back to a body. In the West, this conversation that Abraham and God had led to the three most major religions in the world. More than half the world's population is from either Judaism, Christianity, Islam, all flow from that. In the East, Hindu and Buddhism. And then when we look at native tribes and tribal religions throughout America, we find religious belief. In fact, we don't find magic and animism as much as we find monotheism. We actually find a worship of a creator. Now, a lot of these religions have started off that way, like the Incas. Incas started off with a monotheistic worldview and then became gradually polytheistic over time. But That's a fascinating study all by itself. And come back in April, because we're going to discuss the world religions and where they come from. Even the traditional religions that are based on an ethic, like Shinto, Confucianism, Taoism, and so forth in the Far East, they have the same kind of core longing that we're going to be talking about tonight. Western worldview we call theism, because what we say is eventually there has to be one supreme God that created everything. Where did all this stuff come from? Where? The Creator God who created us. They are separate, distinct. That's the Western worldview. The Western worldview is also man is not just chemicals, and we can reduce our bodies to chemicals. We go to dust, but we have a spirit too. Is there scientific evidence for a spirit? Absolutely. We go to segment number 6 on the website about how we determine that we know that there's a body and a soul. We know we have a body and a soul. And then the other thing that haunts us is our moral compass, that Mother Teresa and Adolf Hitler are different people. They weren't judged properly on this earth, let's put it that way. But if there's not an ultimate judgment day, then both Mother Teresa and Adolf Hitler are morally equivalent. I don't think we want to believe that. But an ultimate judgment day is a part of almost every religion. The way the book of Ecclesiastes says what this is all going to end is he says, remember your Creator while you still can. For a man goes to his eternal home. His dust, yes, his material returns to the earth, but his soul will return to God who gave it. In the East, we have a interesting combination of where God and man are of the same substance, one essence, and your moral life is and your destiny is determined by your karma. What is karma? Karma is an ultimate scorecard of your good deeds and your bad deeds, and your objective is to get to a place of moral perfection. And karma gives you an evaluation when you die of just how good, and you progress up through a series of reincarnations until you eventually get to the supreme cleansing, and liberty from this endless cycle of reincarnation called nirvana. The Bible tells the Western worldview, the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu scriptures, puts it this way. Just like worn out garments are shed by the body, worn out bodies are shed by the dweller. Theology. Theology is the study of God, the love of God. Gets really down to these 3 worldviews, broad categories. The theism, the belief in a personal God who is the creator of all and gives us an afterlife in heaven. Pantheism, which is the Hindu and the Eastern worldview, is there's no distinction between the creator and the created. Afterlife is a series of reincarnations. And then scientific materialism, which is atheistic, says no afterlife because there's no God. If there's no God, there's no afterlife. So ask yourself as we start this tonight, which one of these worldviews would you most likely align with? Our view of the afterlife is based on our view that you just categorized in your own mind. It's one's theology. We all have a theology because we all have a view of God. He either exists or doesn't exist. If it does exist, what kind of God? Is he the creator or not the creator? In the theist worldview, there is a day of judgment by the creator. The afterlife is then our eternal destination to either heaven or hell. Pantheist is the Eastern religion. Pan is a Greek word for everything, so if everything is God, the law of karma then stands apart and judges our life and determines the afterlife through a series of reincarnations. If you're an atheist, you don't think about it. There's no soul, no judgment. You just return to your chemicals when you die, and that's it. So a return to our Creator, whether it's God, Brahma, or chemicals, is the ultimate answer for all 3 worldviews. So the only question that really remains then is when? Is it 30 years from now? Is it 30 months from now? Is it 30 minutes from now? We all have that expiration date sewn into us. And don't know, don't want to think about it, don't care, doesn't really help because that longing to know continues. We want to make sense out of the afterlife. So we have these religious opposing worldviews, I should say. The one thing that says there's no God, no creator, that's direct, evidence that points in this direction, or the materialistic worldview that says only matter and natural law exists. That's the only thing that exists. And as I said, we have 26 forum sessions on that you might want to check out. Now, science is not opposed to religion. In fact, science and religion should be like this, interweaved, even though they don't agree necessarily all the time, and they don't agree a lot of the time. But why should they always be like this? Because they're both searching for truth. They're searching for truth in different ways. The religion is searching for truth, as we said, for following our heart and our soul and this innate longing that we have. And the science is searching for truth through observation, looking through telescopes and microscopes, and projecting what possible theories there should be. But if they're both looking for truth, there can only be one truth. There can't be multiple truths. It'd be total chaos. So they're both searching for truth. So why do we have this problem between science and religion apparently battling each other? Well, it's a battle not between science and religion. It's a battle between what is called materialism, scientific materialism, that just assumes from the very beginning that material is all there is. There is no spirit. There is no soul. Well, if you assume that, then you're not going to find any evidence for it, right? Carl Sagan said the cosmos is all there is, all there ever was, all there ever will be. That's an assumption. That's not a scientific statement. That's a statement of philosophy. That's a statement of his religious belief. That's a religious belief. Steven Weinberg was probably our most preeminent physicist. Won the Nobel Prize, did some incredible scientific work about how the stars produce materials and so forth. And he wrote a book called The First 3 Minutes that explores and explains the first 3 minutes of the Big Bang Theory and how everything just perfectly lined up so that stars and planets would form and everything. At the end of his career, he started saying, the more the universe seems comprehensible. He comprehended it better, almost better than anybody, but the more it seems pointless. That's a sad place to get, isn't it, after all that study? You get to the end and there's no reason, no point to the whole thing. And he wrote that into the end of his book, by the way. But the religious point of view assumes that God exists. Well, now you can't prove scientifically that God exists or doesn't exist, so you have to assume a worldview here. So if we assume a God exists, now that starts providing some answers to us about our origin, our destiny, and why we're here. It gives meaning and purpose to our life. Okay, what is heaven? Well, very simple definition. Heaven is the place where the Creator dwells, where the eternally dwells. Now, God is transcendent. He's out there, can't see Him, and so forth, the universe, but yet He's immanent in our hearts. So the question I want you to ask yourself here, what comes to your mind when you even talk about God? You know, why are you here tonight? Why did you even come? What comes to your mind when you use the word God or heaven? I love the way theologian A.W. Tozer said it. He says, what comes to our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. That's an interesting thing to ponder, isn't it? I'm terrible. I always have to draw a diagram to see something. This is just part of my physics training, I guess, in the old days. But this is how I see it in a diagram. The cosmos, that's everything. Materialism says that's all there is. What's inside that circle there? That's the Hubble telescope. There's nothing else. Life on Earth is in that black spot. Tiny little dot. That's 15.5. Science tells us today it's 15 billion light years across to go. And there's more beyond that maybe. And life on Earth is in that dot. Well, God is outside of that. That little red sphere shows that, or that little red segment tells us that God's outside there. He's transcendent, and yet He's immanent with the cosmos. And we, for the first 5 sessions there, that's on the web, we looked at the scientific evidence. How would a cosmos come out of nothing? We looked at how is a universe like that so finely tuned at every level. It's irreducibly complex, as a matter of fact, at every level. How could life come out of dead chemicals? We saw in our, remember your high school textbook, you had the guy with the test tubes there, and he's saying, oh, just mix the right chemicals together, we're going to get life. That was 70 years ago. We're farther away from understanding how that happened today with all the billions of dollars we put into the laboratory experiments than we were back then. We have no idea of how dead chemicals could produce something as complex as life. Even species of life, you've probably heard me, if you come to any of these at all, how Darwin's theory is literally on the rocks. There's no substitute for it right now, but even most prestigious scientific organizations are saying, we need a new theory of how materialism could produce these species from Darwin's theory. We need something to replace it. But that's how science works. We take it as far as you can with it, and then you say, well, that doesn't work, we're at a barrier, we go to the next level. And then now, neuroscience, the incredible things we're finding out about this, that the mind is not the brain. This 3-pound thing sitting up here is the most complex thing in the universe. We all have it, and it's operating at some fantastic speed and everything, and we're finding out through neuroscience. Sure, we can map out when I see something, red light or something, I get a little flash over here. That doesn't explain how I know something intuitively. In fact, we know things intuitively much more than we know materialistically. We operate like that all the time. We operate on something called prudence, right? We make good decisions constantly. That's not a series of chemicals coming together. There's something going on in something called the mind that's not the brain. And that's what neuroscience is showing. So that's exciting, and we've been dealt with that. Tonight we're going to look at some new research. I shouldn't say new research, of the last 50 years. The last 50 years has produced more interest in this area and more evidence that there's something transcendent to the universe than all the centuries before that. And tonight we're going to look at some afterlife research into that sphere of knowledge in the area we call near-death experiences. Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the age of the 20th century, put it this way. He knew that religion and science both depend on assumptions that are unprovable, yet at the same time they need each other. And this is the way he put it, whether you agree with the statement or not, but at least he knows that they have to fit together somehow. He said that science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind. So, heaven, that's the subject tonight. Is this an imaginary place? I can only imagine. That was the song that was playing when it came in. It's a great movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it, about a father and son. They get reconciled just before they go to heaven. Well, it's a real place to where our soul departs after the body dies. It's not in the universe, as the materialists might say, because it's not subject to the law of decay. The law of decay is called in physics the second law of thermodynamics, which says everything is winding down. We all know that, right? We're winding down. Everything is winding down. Well, the universe is winding down too. And at some point, it either goes into a heat explosion at the end of the age, or it goes into a cold, a big freeze, and that's what science tells us. So everything is just dying. Well, if heaven is eternal, God is eternal, it can't die, so there's no second law of thermodynamics in whatever heaven is, right? I even go as far as say, well, gravity can't exist the same way, because in my view of heaven, which comes out of the book of Revelation, it says that heaven is a cube, 1,400 miles around, 1,400 miles high. Whether you believe it or not, that's something else. But if it was a cube, then it couldn't be a cube with the law of gravity, because it would have to collapse into a sphere. But anyway, heaven is our eternal residence with the Creator. It has fundamentally new physical laws as well as it has moral perfection. There's no longer any death. There's no longer any evil and suffering. Well, I can only imagine. My conclusion is there is a afterlife. Religion and science are compatible, and they're synergistic if they can be talked about together like we're talking about it tonight. And that scientific materialism, as taught in our science classes, is antithetical to theism. And it does not fully explain the questions that we really have. Is there any scientific evidence for for heaven at all? Well, let's look at what I'm calling near-death experiences. I'm not calling it near-death experiences. This actually goes back to 1975. The last 50 years in science has been remarkable. I mean, not only in the physical sciences and in the neurological sciences, but also in the medical sciences of life after life. Raymond Moody back then did a study of 150 people that had a common thread. They claimed they had near-death experiences. And it was really poo-pooed by the scholars at that time of dubious distinction. But these 150 people had a common thread associated with their experiences, that they had this light of supernatural brilliance and beauty when they, quote, died. They had this feeling of unconditional and absolute love. They had this peace of incredible beyond understanding that came upon them. But 50 years of research triggered thousands, literally thousands of studies. If you're interested in this subject, the book that Dick is giving away tonight has a great chapter in it about the reincarnation. But just go on YouTube and see the evidence, the medical evidence, and the testimony of the people who have gone through this, and decide for yourself. I'm going to go through a couple of examples tonight. But just as recently as 2019, they did a massive study across 35 countries and said as many as 1 in 10 people have a near-death experience. That blew my mind. That means some of you out here must have had a near-death experience. I won't ask you to raise your hand, but if you want to, you can. You can talk about it in the conversation. When I talked about this a couple years ago, a little bit, there was a gal that gave me an incredible testimony of her experience. Here's some of the things that have come with this cumulative evidence. 3 out of 4 people have an out-of-body experience when they come back, after they come back from this. 2 out of 3 encounter a supernatural bright light. 1 out of 2 describe an unsurpassed realm of beauty and a loving relationship that surrounds them. 1 out of 2 meet deceased friends, family, relatives, others. 1 out of 4 undergo a life review. Now, this isn't a full life review that we think would happen on a judgment day, but they have a life review. 1 out of 3 encounter some barrier. They know that if they go through this tunnel into the next phase, that'll be one direction they go, or they return to their body. Some of them are given a choice to come on back. And 1 out of 2 of them actually have to face that decision whether or not to return to their body. This is across all races and all cultures. This isn't just an American religious phenomenon. This is across all cultures. This bright light is a bright light. It doesn't have skin color, for example. There's not a blue Krishna or a white Jesus. It's an unsurpassed bright light. And there's this feeling that they describe, no matter what culture they're in, of unconditional love. They experience, a lot of them, as I said, experience a life review. And it basically gets down to this: what have you done with the life I gave you? What have you done with that life? Focus is on relationships, not personal accomplishments. You don't go up and get your merit like we do in the Oscar Awards and so forth. You did such a great job, Stu. We're going to give you this. No, it's not about that. It's what have you done with the relationships that you've had. And people feel no external judgment, as a matter of fact. That they don't report that anyway. They tend to judge themselves about it. They have a sense, and this is really an interesting one about the Eastern worldview. There has not been reports of any sense of reincarnation. Now, I'm not surprised, because reincarnation says you lose your ability to know who you were in the previous life. I know there's Bridie Murphys and so forth, and they claim, and Shirley MacLaines that claim that they had this bad, there's not those experiences with these near-death experiences. There's no sense of reincarnation, and there's no sense of scientific materialism, no sense of atheism, no sense of, well, my body is dissolving into chemicals and that's it. No, there's this love, this peace, this joy that's around them. It's an introduction. These near-death experiences are an introduction to a new heaven and a new earth. And most people's lives are radically changed. I mean, radically changed when they come back. The stories are pretty incredible. I did tell this story, but I'll reintroduce Pam Roberts because this is a local story. Dr. Robert Spetzler at the Barrow Institute, which is in Phoenix, and he's also chair emeritus now at neurosciences at the University of Arizona. He did this operation, but she had a giant aneurysm in her brain. Could burst any time, that would be it. It would be done. She decided that it would be better to die to save her life. What do I mean by that? Well, there's something called hypothermic cardio arrest. It takes your body down to 60 degrees, where your blood can be drained from the brain, doesn't have to go through the heart, so forth. You'd be kept alive. Your organs can be kept alive, and that would give you'd only last 3 or 4 or 5 minutes in a normal situation like that. But with this being at 60 degrees, they could operate on. He would have at least a half hour to repair that aneurysm that's in her brain. He did that operation. It was fully monitored. It was witnessed. It was attested to by everybody. Objective, independent, verifiable scientific evidences. The whole operation was 7 hours. 20 doctors and nurses over Pam. Complete anesthesia she had. Her body's chilled to 60 degrees. Her eyes are taped shut. They put devices in her ears for EEG, brainwave monitoring. Her body's on full support. The blood is drained not only from body parts, but it's drained from her brain. She doesn't have any blood flowing in her brain. She is clinically dead. No brain waves. She's flatlined on that. She's flatlined on heart. And they cut into her skull, repair the aneurysm, and bring her back to life. No heartbeat. No brain waves. What does she describe? Well, this is how she describes it afterwards. She felt her body, herself pop out of her body. She described the haircut that they gave her when she was in that condition, because it was an unusual haircut. She described the drill that they used to cut her brain or her skull open. She even described what she thought was a dent in the drill. She described a blood drain conversation, which was really fascinating to me. There was nurses there, and they evidently cut into an artery here in your thigh. They couldn't get it out of one thigh. She heard the nurse say, "Well, go to do the other thigh." And she reports this. There was no way she could possibly have known that. Her arteries are too small. Try the other side. She hears that from the nurses coming back. Then she hears she's coming back to life, and then she describes it was like the plunging into a pool of ice. So what'd she do? What's her experience during this NDE? Well, she's floating effortlessly in and out of body. She sees the tunnel of light. She senses the being of light. She feels the unconditional love. She has encounters with a couple relatives. She has time travel experience in a younger life. She sees the boundary between life and afterlife, and no sense of time passing. So Dr. Spetzler, at the end of this, what's he say? I don't have any explanation for it. I don't even know how it's possible. but he validated each fact of the case, that she was anesthetized, the instruments were covered up, her eyes were taped shut, her ears she couldn't hear, she flatlined, and so forth. This was a whole series of BBC broadcasts that she was specialized in. Here's another one. In fact, I just looked at the YouTube, this guy. I looked at it last night when I heard about him because I liked the idea that he's an atheist. He starts off as an atheist. Pam could, obviously could have some wishful thinkings about childhood and so forth. He is surfing the world, and he gets to do scuba diving in off India, I think, off the coast of India, and he gets stung by the world's deadliest box of fish, jellyfish, called the boxfish. Evidently, one sting in 20 minutes will do you in. He was stung 4 or 5 times at that, and he's dying. And he remembers his mother reading him the Lord's Prayer when he was young, and he remembers his mother. He sees a vision of his mother right in front of him, and she says, "Cry out to God." Now, I saw his testimony. It was really interesting because at the exact same time this is happening, she had a premonition she should be praying. She was a Christian. He was an atheist. And she had a premonition that she should be praying for him. And that's the exact same time that he was going through this vision. And all of a sudden, what he called an unspeakable bright light appeared and pulled him out of the darkness. And a presence who knew everything about him. He was shamed. His life started, life review, he was ashamed. But instead of judgment, he felt pure, unadulterated, clean, undeserved love. That's his quote. He said, "I knew I was standing in the presence," as he said it, "of Almighty God." This one really gets to me because here's an Oxford professor who's one of the world's leading atheists that wrote about atheism and had an attack, died, and claimed that he was confronted by a red light, exceedingly bright and also very painful. "I was aware that the light was responsible for the government of the universe." Whoa. He said, he was asked afterwards, he said, "Well, now has this weakened your belief in your atheism?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. It weakens my logical argument, but I hope there's no afterlife." Isn't that the case? I mean, our will to do what we want to believe in spite of the evidence. The Lancet, which is one of the world's most finest scientific publication, academic journals, has been around since the 1830s, I think. They helped sponsor a report or a study by Pim van Lommel, who is a Dutch cardiologist, because they wanted to have a scientific explanation that would testify against all these personal experiences. So they reported on this study. The study failed to explain any better alternative than what actually was testified to. It even reported on 7-year-old Katie, who died in a swimming pool. She was dead for 20 minutes. And she was reported that she had an out-of-body experience where she followed her family home and looked in their living room. She saw what her father was wearing, what they were eating at the table, what her kid brother was playing with. Many skeptics now conclude that NDE is the best explanation for this, and it does give us a peek into the afterlife. So my conclusion on this anyway is that NDE, out-of-body, is the best explanation for the totality of the evidence of life after clinical death. At minimum, we should believe that consciousness continues after clinical death. That's what the evidence says, right? So it's logical then, if our consciousness survives, then we survive. Dr. Jeffrey Long, a real hardcore researcher and oncologist, says, NDEs provide such powerful scientific evidence that it's reasonable to accept the existence of the afterlife. So if you want to read about that and other things I've talked about tonight, Dick, I hope you give the book to the right people here. Anyway, you get one. They get one chance at it, right? Just one. But anyway, Lee Strobel, we've used his work before. He was a former atheist and became a believer because he investigates all this stuff and just said, I give up. He wrote the book, The Case for Heaven, a New York Times bestseller author. He was the legal editor, award-winning legal editor for the Chicago Tribune, and he provides evidence. If you want to know about the world religions, in April we're going to discuss Houston Smith's work. Houston Smith is the most highly regarded, most highly regarded studier of world religions. He taught at MIT and UC Berkeley, and his book on the world's religions sold over 3 million copies, 12 honorary degrees, so he's honored by many people. And then we're going to talk a little bit, since most of us are American, probably most of us have some kind of Judeo-Christian background. So we hear stories and we see stories. We just celebrated Christmas and a lot of Christmas stories and so forth. Randy Alcorn put a book together called Heaven, which I think is in our lending library. Should be. If it's not, please report it and I'll make sure it does get there. I know there's a little pamphlet in there by him that are going to deal with the questions that we're going to deal with tonight. But he's a New York Times best-selling author too, and he's regarded by Christians as the most comprehensive, giving the most comprehensive and definitive look on the subject. So this is the time for digging into it a little bit more. I'm going to bring my partner up here, my associate, Greg Schrock. Come on up, Greg. And Greg and I are going to have a little conversation about these 5 questions, which probably are questions that you've thought about before yourself. What is heaven going to be like? Will we be reunited with our loved ones? Who will be there? What will we be doing in heaven? Won't we get bored, right? I was always worried about that one. But what I'm going to do, instead of expressing a personal opinion, which is not what you're here for, but since Randy did all the research and put it together into a comprehensive guide, go ahead, Greg, have a seat. I'm going to come join you in a second, and we're going to have a little conversation about these 5 questions anyway. But what I'm going to try to do is summarize, and I've even written down things that I got out of Randy's book, summarize the answers from his book. Now, he's going to be giving a traditional, what I call a traditional American perspective, Christian perspective on this. But I had to make a whole series of notes here, Greg, because as you ask me these questions, I don't want to appear too ignorant. But you might start with saying something about the right-hand corner there.
Yeah, well, thank you for the very good talk. Before we get started on that, I just thought it was interesting to bring up that you're really appealing to do 2 different things here in this talk. Mm-hmm. We in Socrates at Saddlebrook are always interested in the evidence, because evidence is always going to show what's actually true. And so you did appeal to 2 things. One is you appealed to the innate sense of the transcendent that is in everybody. And is there scientific evidence for that? Well, it's testimonial evidence that I think everybody here has some sense of that beauty calls to something more, or music or something like that. And you can't put that in a test tube and weigh it, but we all know it's real. And we can involve our minds in entertainments that help us to push such transcendent thoughts away. The younger you are, I think the more you do that kind of thing, but it's in everybody. The other thing that I think it's really cool that you're appealing to, and this again goes right along with this in the same vein as what every talk you give is, there is scientific evidence for the afterlife in the form of these NDEs, these near-death experiences. This was a revelation for me when I was, I had a feeling of the transcendent my whole life, but only a couple of years ago did I realize that there's actually really good scientific evidence for the afterlife. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think you did a good job in bringing those both up. So you're right. I think everybody here really does want to know some of the answers to these questions. Before I noticed that you've got some swords over here. Are you you ready to do combat, or what's that all about? I'm not sure what's going on.
I can't believe talking about these kind of questions and giving a particular view won't result in an opposing view. Maybe even to the point where I don't believe that. That's ridiculous. But that's the idea behind Socrates, right? We're supposed to cross swords. That's how we learn more this way.
Yeah.
One of my favorite people is Dr. Stephen Meyer of the Discovery Institute. And he always says when he was taking his PhD at Cambridge, he says, beware of one hand clapping. And what he means by that, when you think about it, this is one hand clapping. You can't hear anything. It's not until you have an opposing argument. So we learn by opposing arguments, and that's what I mean by that. So we want to hear what Randy has to say, but we also want to hear what you all have to say as well.
You might have gotten a few swords up when you told everyone they have an expiration date, actually. I don't know. But
anybody here not have one?
Well, okay, so what is heaven going to be like? I am struck that the current culture depicts heaven as a cloudy place, a place where we all have wings and we eternally strum on harps and this kind of thing. Is this really what we're to expect? What do you think?
Yeah, it's unfortunate where that imagery comes from. I mean, there is a history to it. It goes back to the ancient Greeks, but the way heaven is described in the traditional Christian view, the biblical view, let's put it that way, is not that way at all. It's a real new heaven and earth, a real new one. I mean, even we'll call it physical, but not material. There's And the reason that it's structured that way is because the New Testament testifies that Jesus was resurrected from the grave. That was evidently the proof that Paul said anyway when he talked to the Greek philosophers on Mars Hill. He said, God furnished proof about this by raising him from the dead. And they go, resurrection from the dead. Well, did it occur or not occur? It makes a difference if that was a historical event or not a historical event. But the question that you raise is, if you believe in what the traditional Christian worldview is, you have to believe it's actually a physical place. Physical place like what? Well, remember the original story, the Garden of Eden was supposed to be a paradise, right? Before the fall.
Yep.
That was a physical place. There was real things going on, but there wasn't evil. There wasn't evil and suffering. And as we talked about in our first forum of this season, evil and suffering came in through free will, through disobedience to the Creator. That's not just a Christian or a Judeo-Christian or Islamic worldview. That's a worldview of everywhere. I mean, you have a set of rules, moral rules. Law of karma is like that. Karma is evident, nirvana's perfection, but we fall short. So you have to reincarnate it until you get there. You know, it's a moral cause and effect. So these cartoon characters, don't go there. I mean,
don't fall for that. Yeah.
That's boring. I mean, I can't even imagine how boring that would be, right? Stringing my
you got it
10 and I can't even play a 10 whatever. So it wouldn't be good. But all earthly things, what the Christian worldview is that all things are eternally renewed, and it's all things, not just bodies, but cities, nations, walls.
Things that we're familiar with, that we sort of see here on this earth, will be magnified and glorified somehow. Yeah.
So it really, but it's new. It's renewed.
Renewed.
It doesn't have sin. It doesn't have death. It doesn't have suffering associated. It doesn't have decay. There's no second law of thermodynamics to wear it down, right? So it's spectacularly beautiful, and it's going to stay like that.
Well, that gets back to the slide that you showed us of these commonalities of these near-death experiences where people actually report magnificent things that they can't really describe when they come back, right? That means that there's some kind of a physical, transcendent beauty that is waiting for us, and it's common.
Absolutely. And some of these testimonies, as I said on YouTube, are really remarkable. I mean, colors that you can't describe. I always thought the palette on Microsoft, 256 million or whatever it is, and the beauty and so forth, they can't even describe that. So.
One of the other things that was, you were talking about, one of the commonalities that people experience is they run into and see loved ones.
Oh,
is
yes.
that it? So will we be reunited with our loved ones? What do you think?
Absolutely. Every testimony is to that. I mean, it's our intuitive sense, and we long for that. Yes. Freud thought that he was onto something because we long for it, that it must be man-made. But these testimonies from these NDE experiences, no, they see their loved ones. And they're right there, and it's all the best part. They even see angels. Angels are these created beings. You must have watched It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, yes.
Remember
Anytime
Jimmy
a
Stewart,
bell
right?
rings, an angel gets his wings, right? We all know that. Yeah.
So there's angels, and if that's the case, I'd love to meet my guardian angel, because I felt many times that I had somebody looking after me to get me through a tough time. But this is probably really resonate with a lot of people. There'll be animals. I think there'll be animals. I mean, at least the Bible says there'll be animals in heaven, right? The lion's going to...
The lion will lie down with the lamb, right?
Lay down with, yeah, absolutely. I would think there's even dogs and cats.
I read Randy Alcorn's book also, and he says that some of these questions aren't actually explicitly answered in the Bible, but he thinks if God created animals, and we love animals, and we can see the creation of that and the beauty of that, why would he deprive us of such a thing in eternity? It's an interesting take.
And if you think about the Garden of Eden, that's where the animals started, right?
That's right. That's right. So we talked about what heaven might be like, and will we be reunited with loved ones? That does bring up the next question, which might be an uncomfortable question. Like, who will be there? Who will be in heaven?
Wonder how many arguments we can start with this one.
Oh boy, yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, I have to say every religion has its own set of qualifications, and it all basically is there is a right, living rightly, there is a rule, right, that's set up,
right.
And whatever evil and suffering comes, it's because of our free will to rebel against that. That's the whole basis of judgment and so forth. So if there's a judgment, how far you go, if this is the standard and you're here and you're Eastern reincarnate, you go up this way. In the biblical version anyway, it's by what New Testament says about it. And New Testament is very clear about it. It says if you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, you'll be saved. That's the basis of that. It's interesting, most Americans believe they're going to heaven. Barna studies said that 120, they asked, had a huge survey, and out of 120 people that said they were going to heaven, only one would say that they're going the other direction. So that must be a wish fulfillment too. And in the Eastern religions, as I said before, you're judged by your karma. But eventually there's even an end to that cycle, because when you allegedly, and when I say you, I don't really mean you, because it's not a you. It's a transmutation of your soul into another being. I mean, you might even start off as a plant and end up as an animal, and then end up as a person, and then end up whatever. So there is an end to it, and that's the achievement
Nirvana,
of perfection.
right? Yeah.
Nirvana, yeah. So.
Yeah, and of course, then the next logical question is, well, which one is true? Because both Western religion, like Christianity, cannot be true at the same time as these Eastern religions, because they both make truth claims that don't point in the same direction. And I would just appeal to all the other things that you've done in this series, because when you look at all of the evidence, I believe it points straight to a monotheistic God. Not a polytheistic God, not a pantheistic God. It actually points to a monotheistic God. And so as you're considering which which type of religion you want to subscribe to, I would highly recommend you look at the evidence, because I believe it goes straight to the Christian worldview every time. So, who will be there? We talked about that. What will we be doing? What will we be doing in heaven besides strumming those harps? Because, of course, I'm sure somebody will be doing that. But what are we going to be doing?
Well, I'm not going to be strumming a guitar, but I can hardly wait to be a jazz pianist.
Are you going to automatically know how to do that when you get there, or do you have to learn it? I've always wondered that.
But our greatest, just think about this. We have new and improved minds. We have a new heaven, a new earth. We're going to operate much better than we do now. We're going to be free of sin and death and sickness and diseases and so forth. So it's going to be much more like a paradise, like the original Garden of Eden was paradise. But we'll be making plans, decisions, living kind of like we do now, visiting new places, creating new things. But can you imagine without all the shackles that we have in our physical being, because we're unrestrained, and time is unrestrained in heaven too. This is how I interpret all the data anyway.
Okay.
It gets me excited. I'm not worried about being bored. I can hardly wait to do all these things. Be traveling anywhere in the new creation, visiting new places. But our greatest pleasure will probably be being around God.
Sure. Yep.
Which we can't do now in some kind of immaterial physical sense. Yeah.
And the sense that we have where we long for the transcendent. We long for beauty, we long for things that call to us, but I think in large part we long for our Creator. And so what you're saying is we will see our Creator perhaps face to face, and that will be just a monumental experience, but that we will do other things as well.
Yeah, I just viewed a new and improved operating system for your computer. Remember the old DOS?
Oh yeah, I do.
Remember how
I'm old enough to remember that, actually. Yes.
The old DOS compared to where we are today. So iOS 53. That's what it'll be.
53 million. How about
53 million?
Maybe we already answered this, but I think a lot of people, I've actually heard this, that people don't want to go to heaven because they think it's going to be boring, and they think that hell is going to be one big party. I kid you not, I've read this online. That there's my one mistake, right? Believing what I read online. But is it going to be boring, Dr. Stu?
Oh boy, I can't wait. Preparing for this study has just been such a thrill for me because, and as I get older and closer to that 30 minutes or 30, I don't think it's going to be 30 years for me, but it could be. I hope it's at least 30 months. But I can visit with anyone at any time I want to. No restraint. I've already had my guest list made out, right? I want to have a party like Albert Einstein did. He had his party. I want to visit with Isaac Newton. I want to be there at the moment of creation. Wouldn't that be fantastic? I want to be there and know the Apostle Paul and find out. I want to be there when he was delivering his sermon at Mars Hill to the Greek philosophers. And I want to interview the Stoics and the Epicureans afterwards. And say, what do you think of that? I can hardly wait to do that. I want to travel all over the universe. I don't want to travel just to travel, the Rhine River or the Seine River or whatever. I want to go to what's it like on Jupiter and Mars. I want to go out to the ends of the. I want to see the edge of the universe. I want to see the pale blue dot from 3 trillion miles away. I want to see if there's other life out there. I don't know. I mean, God could have created other life. There's no evidence of it. But we had this passion in NASA to everything we do is there life there? Is there elements? That's what everybody wants to know. They want to know, right? They want these immaterial longings,
Yeah.
be satisfied.
What you're talking about is the thrill of discovery and everything you're talking about.
Yes.
So there isn't a sense where when we go to heaven, we'll suddenly know everything, right? I mean, God is going to reveal things in an eternity, I suppose, and we'll have an eternity of discovery of His creations.
I think that's huge,
Yeah.
right? It's not, we want God does this, snaps that. No, it's a long, drawn-out
Yeah.
process. I mean, even science today attributes the creation to a 13.6 billion year period or whatever, and people say, well, that didn't happen. It only happened 6,000 years ago. I mean, he's stretching out things. Hubble, when he looked at the telescope there, Mount Wilson, we talked about that in a couple of our series before, and they thought that the Milky Way was the only things in our galaxy. There wasn't, and he saw these nebula out there. It's the first time he peeked through the Milky Way into all the other. Now the Hubble telescope and the JWST telescope show us on a pinpoint in the sky billions of stars and galaxies. And just incredible thing. I want to see that. I mean, anything I can imagine. But on a personal basis, I want to be that star left-handed pitcher that I never could be. I want to be that point guard that shoots the winning basket.
The winning basket.
Right? The winning basket. And playing jazz piano. I mean, it won't be boring. I'm getting really excited about what this could be. And I think the neat thing is, in studying NDE, is that people have their testimonies all line up in that area. That there is a peace, a joy, a goal, a heaven, a beauty, and so forth that we all yearn for across cultures. We don't have testimony where evil rules and this partying that you're talking about. I've attended plenty of those parties in my life, especially in college days. College days, and the next morning I was sorry I did.
Sorry,
right?
Yep.
I don't think there's going to be any next morning of being sorry.
Well, of course, there's some pushback to near-death experiences as evidence for the afterlife. I know that Michael Shermer got interviewed by Joe Rogan a few years ago, and Michael Shermer is the editor of Skeptic Magazine, a hardened atheist, and he thinks that it's the chemicals that are working on the brain and that sort of thing at the time of death, and that's why we hallucinate and that kind of thing. But I was just studying this a little bit over the last couple days, and there are 3 points of evidence actually that refute that. I thought was very interesting that these near-death experiences cannot be explained by chemicals and just the brain. And one of them are verifiable observations. You hinted to this in some of your slides, but people claim to float outside their body and go to other places, and then those things that they experience, they bring back and say, hey, I saw something over here, or I heard this person say this, and those have been verified time and time again. There was one example of a woman named Mary who was in a London hospital, died, floated up several stories, and when she came back, they had ceiling fans at the time in these hospital rooms, and as she came back, she noticed there was a red sticker on the top of one of the ceiling fans. And she read it. She knew what it said, and when she came back, she described to this nurse that she had just been floating, and the nurse is like, yeah, that's nice. And she said, well, why don't you go and verify it? There is a red sticker on top of that ceiling fan, and it says this, and it was verified. These are the types of things that have been verified over and over again, these observations. And that cannot be explained by chemicals mixing in your brain at the time of death. Another one that's very interesting is that there are near-death experiences by people who are blind their entire life. They were born blind. And for the very first time, they can see what a tree is and looks like and what colors look like. And they come back and they attest to these things. And yet you can't appeal to the brain because their brains in particular had never experienced what a tree looked like. It's amazing stuff. And then the third line of evidence that is not just chemicals mixing in the brain is that, and you brought this up, Stu, that people from all different cultures and backgrounds and religions see more or less the same stuff. regardless of their religious background, regardless of the wishful thinking that might have come from their own religion. They see a being of light, love emanating from that being, these types of common threads. And so I just wanted to bring that up, that it is not, there's really good evidence that it's not just chemicals mixing in a dying brain. So, well, I want to make sure we have plenty of time to bring you all into the discussion. So, Dick, I think you're going to lead this part where we can take some questions and comments from you all.
An interesting topic, to be sure. Stick around to the end so we have a drawing to who's going to win this little gift bag. But thank you, Stu. Thank you, Greg. We're going to open it up now to questions and comments. And what I ask you again is, it looks like there's a number of hands up, so if you can, be as brief as possible so we can get as many people in. And we've got a microphone back here, we've got a microphone here. If you hand the mic back to me when you're done, that'll be great.
One thing that comes to my mind, a lot of people don't realize Winston Churchill dabbled in figurative art, oil paintings and such. And he was interviewed one time and asked about that. And he said, I've had a lot of challenges and I had a great deal of success in meeting challenges in my life, but painting is the most frustrating thing I've ever done. And I'm so frustrated. In fact, if I die and go to heaven, I plan to spend the first 1,000,000 years or so getting to the bottom of it. So that was his solution to not being bored.
There was one over here. Yeah. Here we go. And then you'll be next.
I noticed that there was no discussion about a pre-life, and I'm wondering why. Is the contention that we become eternal once we're born as a human life? Is that why there's no pre-life?
Pre-life, you're talking about that we're that's a good point. Some religions believe that there is we're a spirit beforehand. We become incarnated. The Western religions believe that the pre-life is in the mind of the Creator, and it's not really the person, but the design and the person's in their mind, and you've been created for a purpose. So, and then you live your life forward eternally from there. But that's a good point.
Thank you again both for the presentation this evening. It's always informative and makes everybody's life happier, I think, and we appreciate what you're doing every Tuesday, the first of the month. Greg, you made a statement during the conversation here about, you used the phrase, Christian religion worldview is different than Eastern religion worldview, is what I wrote down. Is that what you said?
Yes, that's what I said.
It
has different truth claims.
Have you happened, I just finished the autobiography of a yoga, which was written in 1946 by Paramasa Yogananda, and it's supposedly one of the top 100 spiritual books ever written. During that, it's about a 500-page read, but it's well worth it, one of the best books I've ever read. And in it, he talks about the universal spiritualism. In other words, the bringing together not just of Eastern religions, but he also refers frequently to Christian religion, Muslim, Islam, Judaism, etc. And so, to me, I think seems like a rational idea to look into, is a universal spiritualism. It encompasses all religious beliefs.
Certainly, all religious beliefs have some things in common, right? They believe in a spiritual world, a realm of some sort. But there are other truth claims that Christianity makes that is diabolically opposite of Eastern religions. One of them being monotheism. The great Western faiths like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all believe in a monotheistic deity of some sort, a creator, whereas Eastern religions don't believe that. I believe the Hindus, how many billions of gods or millions or billions of gods do they believe in? So there are fundamental differences in those worldviews. I happen to believe that the evidence baked into the universe will show us which way that goes. So I don't subscribe to a universalism of any sort. I believe that the Christian worldview best explains the data around us and the evidence. But certainly there are commonalities. I mean, the love, for example. I mean, all religions teach that love is a virtue, and hate is a vice. But I think we as rational beings should be striving towards the worldview that best explains all the data around us. And so I believe that's the Christian worldview. I don't know if you have anything to add, Stu.
Well said. Well, I'm thinking about Hinduism, for example, thinks that religion is like a giant mountain, and every road is a path to achieve the same top. That's certainly a worldview that's competitive or opposed by a single road of a single creator that has you in mind from the very beginning. So again, the purpose of Socrates here is to thank you for bringing that up, to challenge the different worldviews and check it out and evaluate it yourself, and like you did very nicely, give a claim for a particular point of view. That's good, but thank you for doing that.
I have one over here.
Thank you for sharing today. I have grandchildren, and sometimes they come up with the darndest things, and it makes you wonder where it came from. But is anybody thinking of the near-death experiences with children, and they have not had all the life experiences that we do as we age? And that would be an interesting study.
I know that one person studied an 8-year-old who had an experience like that. So near-death experiences are experienced by children. I don't know that a study's ever been done to contrast those with adult near-death experiences. Are you aware of one, Stu?
Well, I do. It was reported in the Lancet, by the way, 7-year-old Katie. And she was dead for 20 minutes. She died in a swimming pool and was flatlined, dead. And then when she miraculously came back to life, and not only described the same things that we're talking about here, Greg, but she also described following her parents home one night and telling them exactly, and then telling the researcher afterwards exactly what they were wearing, what her little brother was playing with, the toy he was playing with, and so forth. I mean, I found that rather incredible. To be reported in Lancet. I mean, this is like the top academic journal out of Britain for reporting these kind of things. So.
One here, and then there's one over here.
Thank you for your talk today. The Bible speaks of Jesus returning to judge the living and the dead and to establish his kingdom. Is that the heaven that you're talking about? And if so, the people that have come before us and the people that have near-death experiences, that have visited relatives and had contact relatives, what sort of heaven are they in, or are they in a heaven?
Boy, that's a good one. It's really interesting, and not only are there differences between the world religions, there's differences within just take one religion. It's like Christianity, for example. And since the Bible is a written word, you would think, well, there wouldn't be that many interpretations of it, but there are. I mean, because that's my religion, I know more about that one than I know about any other one. And there are people called, do you believe in the millennial kingdom or not the millennial kingdom? Do you believe in the intermediate earth, or is that the same thing as the new heaven and the new earth? And it seems how the Bible teaches clearly from the Apostle Paul. He said to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So there has to be some immediate transition to an intermediate heaven. But at the same time, Judaism and Christianity teach of a final judgment at the end of the age, when this new heaven and this new earth takes place. So there's two phases, what I'm getting from what you're saying. There's two phases to heaven. There's an immediate transposition to an immaterial state that's awaiting a final judgment. At the final judgment, that's what's called the second coming of Christ. That's when the great white throne judgment takes place, and the new heaven, the new earth. So some of the things we're talked about have been mixed up into that. Then you can add a third component to it, of whether or not what you believe about the book of Revelation. Is there a millennial kingdom or not a millennial kingdom? About Armageddon, there's the different Lutherans are different than Catholics, are different than evangelicals in their belief about what happens. But the phase is still the same. When you die, you immediate presence with the Lord in some kind of immaterial state, awaiting a judgment day. And this is in Judaism too. And at the final judgment, that's when the resurrection of the dead takes place. It's when the resurrection of that's when the living meet with the dead, and then everybody's judged at that particular time. So, does that help? Might be more confusing than helping, but those are kind of the broad views.
Here is my take about what heaven is going to be like. We no longer have a body. There's no chemistry. There's no materialism. It's just the spirit. And based on the near-death experience of all the people that you explained, and people, about all that, there'll be just light, happiness. Nothing exists. You just float around, basically. And I don't think that you will meet people that you love in the path. There'll be nothingness, and there's nothing to do. So you're not going to get bored or anything. There's nothing to do. There's no traveling. It's just consciousness that you have. But as spirit, you no longer have that consciousness. So that's my take of the heaven. That's it.
Well, yeah, we are. The Bible does say that we'll be getting new bodies, and so there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. And so I appreciate you saying what your beliefs are. I actually do believe that there's going to be physicality, because I think that the scriptures that I believe in point in that direction. But of course, there's lots of views on the afterlife.
I had a question about the near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. What's the longest duration where someone was clinically dead and still revived? You mentioned 20 minutes, that young girl that was dead because she drowned. What's the longest duration? Has anybody been dead for an hour, 3 hours, and were revived and still had a conscious memory?
Yeah, good question. Your body breaks down after 20 minutes or so. So there is a point where medically you couldn't be revived unless you were recreated somehow. There hasn't, to my knowledge, hasn't been any evidence of a person being recreated that long. Let's see, Pam's operation was 7 hours long, but I think she was flatlined only for about 30 minutes when she had her aneurysm repaired. He needed that much time to repair the aneurysm, and then she came back. What's fascinating is there's experience, neuroscience now is showing you don't even need your brain, your 100% of your brain to function. There has been people that have only 10% of their brain that operate. I've been accused of that. Haven't I, hon?
I know. Remarkably, I have no brain.
But that's a good one. I haven't heard anything beyond a half hour. But, to the person that's undergoing it, it's a long period of time. It's much longer. They're having experiences with that fellow that was stung by the boxfish. he thought he was out for days, but he really wasn't. Physiologically, there are limits from which you can't recover.
We have time.
This isn't necessarily a question, but there are people that have been dead longer. The Bible speaks of Lazarus having been dead for 4 days. And of course, for Christians who celebrate Easter and Christ, he was dead for 3 days. And there was all kinds of drama about, won't he smell, and how can you do that, and so on and so forth. So, I don't think the Creator who creates is limited to a time period as far as doing, obviously those were miracles, but I think we fall short if we limit him and put a time limit on any of his doings. If he truly is the Creator and we believe that, then there's no limit to when and what he can create.
Great comment. I wouldn't put that in the same category as medically, a near-death experience, but certainly it's reported in the Bible as a historical event, right? So it either happened or didn't happen. And if you believe that the Bible is true, like most Christians do, then it actually was a historical event. We don't have any additional testimony other than what's written there. But that's an excellent point. And the best testimony is the life of the resurrected body for Christ. He lived for 6 weeks afterwards. So if the resurrection is true, he lived for 40, 50 days before he went back to heaven, and he was seen by over 500 people. That's pretty credible testimony. So thank you for bringing that up.
Well, we need to wrap it up.